The Curiosity of
a Child.
Episode 48.
Exciting.
I actually wrote it down this time.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, in nice big writing so we don't forget.
This episode, we sail around the globe the wrong way, telling an epic tale of survival, visit a tropical island in search of gold, and learn about an unusual hermit.
That's right, but before we do that, I've got a couple of quick announcements for you. So, first of all, we are delighted to have been invited back to Intelligent Speech for this year, and it's an online history conference by history podcasters for history fans. And what's the theme this time, Anton?
Contingency.
Yeah, and contingency plans. And there's some really big names talking this year, including us, of course, and History on Fire and Our Fake History. And it's on the 4th of November 2023 from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you use the offer code CURIOSITY, you get 10% off. And you can buy your tickets at intelligentspeechonline.com. And we've got a really exciting contingency plan, which we're working on at the moment. Well, we're not working on the plan, we're working on the tail of the plan.
Mm-hmm. You better buy tickets. You have to.
Hey everyone, my name's Sebastian Major, and I am the host of the Our Fake History podcast.
I'm Rebecca Larson with the Tudors Dynasty podcast.
This is Greta Harden. I'm the host of The History of American Food.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Jacobs. I'm the host of Wittenberg to Westphalia, The Wars of the Reformation.
Hello.
I'm Anton.
And I'm Rick. We're the Curiosity of a Child podcast.
I'm David Montgomery, host of The Siècle.
Hi, I'm Bree from Pontifex.
My name is Roberto Toro, and I'm the host of Tsar Power and the History of Sakartvelo, Georgia.
Hello, and welcome to Totalis Rankium. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Rob, and this is letting you know that we will be speaking at Intelligent Speech.
I am looking forward to speaking at Intelligent Speech 2023.
And I will be speaking at Intelligent Speech Online this year.
Mark your calendars for this November 4th. Intelligent Speech, the online conference for history fans by history podcasters.
It's a three-ring circus of fascinating content with around 24 hours of live presentations and roundtables happening in 4 digital rooms.
This year is all about contingencies.
Times when history meets the unexpected.
The topic of my keynote address is No Contingencies, Stories of Historical Figures Who Did Not Have a Backup Plan.
All about the Tudors and their contingency plans. Because, let's be real, they had a lot of them.
So what are we going to be doing?
We're going to be telling the story of what happens when you're starving in a city under siege for months, surrounded by food that you can't eat as it's your life's work, food that is more important than you are.
So go to intelligentspeechonline.com to get your tickets.
We'll see everybody on November 4th.
If you love the podcast, please vote for us at the British Podcast Awards. Go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting. Search for The Curiosity of a Child and vote.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing that. And don't forget to leave a review as well, wherever you're listening, which helps us out. Just a quick thing, one last announcement in non-podcasting news. I founded a brand new web and design agency with a couple of my friends, and we're called You and Us. And it's something that we've long dreamed of doing. So if you want really amazing design, brilliant development, like branding, advertising, web development, check us out at youandus.co.uk. That's uandus.co.uk.
I can vouch for that being good.
Ah, thank you, mate. No bias there.
No, but it is actually good. It is actually good.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of experience there. Quite old now. Anyway, shall we get on with the show, mate? I mean, what are we talking about this time?
We are talking about treasure.
So when you imagine treasure, what kind of things do you think about? What comes to mind for you?
I think of Pirates of the Caribbean, lots of TV shows where they go on treasure hunts.
Yeah, lots of adventures and stories and stuff like that. Actually, pirates do come up a lot, don't they, there?
Mm.
But in a way, the pirates always seem to be like goodies, or quite often the goodies, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Or the adventure that you're going on, that treasure, doesn't matter who it belongs to. I mean, it's yours at the end of the day, if you get it, isn't it? But we're not going to start with pirates.
No.
No, our first story is the tale of a hermit. And it's also a very sad account of a man who was obsessed and desperate to discover doubloons. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, this story comes from a book called Hairy Men in Caves.
I like that title.
It's a really good title, and it's all about hermits in America. But before we meet our hermit, we set the scene a little bit. It's 1864 and the American Civil War is still raging, and James and John Reynolds, they're members of the 3rd Texas Cavalry, but the brothers become better known as the Reynolds Gang. And they launch raids into Colorado from Texas, and the idea is that they're going to go and plunder stagecoaches and towns in the area around South Park. There's also lots of gold mines and things in the area.
South Park?
Yeah, that is the same South Park as in the TV show. Not that you've ever seen that, of course.
No, I've never even heard of it.
No. You only know it through the socks that I still wear with South Park characters on.
Yeah.
The brothers, they soon amass a considerable fortune from all the raiding they're doing, and they attract the attention of the Union. He sent a force led by Colonel Shivington to capture them. Now, he spotted flickering flames of their campfire on the 31st of July, and soon a shootout ensued. One of the bandits was shot dead, and he had his head severed, and then the Union forces, they kept that as a trophy.
That's treasure.
That is the real treasure here, yes. Then the rest of the gang, they ran for the hills. Then after several days of hunting, 5 more of the bandits were captured, but John Reynolds, he managed to escape, like the gang leader. The 5 prisoners, they should have been held to await their sentencing, but Colonel Shivington, he wanted to really make a point here, so he ordered them to be executed. But his men refused, and they actually fired over the heads of these captured men. So the colonel himself, he shot one of the men in the head. But then one of his soldiers, who had been robbed previously by the gang, he shot the rest of them dead. So pretty brutal. But in the official report that Colonel Shivington wrote, he said that they had tried to escape. But later on, there was some evidence found that they had been tied up around a tree. So that was obviously a fake report that had been given there. Just trying to cover up the bad things they've been doing.
That's naughty.
That's very naughty. But there's no gold or treasure yet, is there?
Mm-mm. Except from the severed head.
Oh, yeah, the big prize. Mm-hmm. So James Reynolds, 7 years later, he was mortally injured in a shootout, and on his deathbed, he drew a map giving the location of the stash of the treasure that they'd taken when they were a gang all those years earlier. And he also left a letter, and on it he wrote, "Jim and me buried the treasure the morning before the posse attack on Geneva Gulch. You go up above there a little ways, where you find one of our horses mired down in the swamp. On up at the head of the gulch, turn to the right and follow the mountain a little further around. Just above the head of Deer Creek, we found an old prospect hole. At about the timber line, there we placed $40,000 in greenbacks, wrapped in silk oilcloth, and 3 cans of gold dust. We filled the mouth of the cave up with stones, and then, 10 steps back, struck a butcher knife into a tree about 4 feet from the ground and broke the handle off and left it pointing towards the mouth of the hole. So they've buried the treasure, and they've stuck a knife in a tree, pointing at the location where it should be. So, where's our hermit, I hear you cry?
Where's our hermit?
It's the early 1870s, and up in the hills a man has built himself a cabin and surrounded it with holes. He's mining. He's not very good, but he is enthusiastic. And his name is?
John.
No. He's not a member of the gang.
He's not a member of the gang.
No.
Is it a president?
No.
Is it, I don't know.
His name is Anton.
It's Anton.
Yes, Anton Glassman.
That's my name, by the way.
That is your name, yeah, that's why I chose this story. During his life, he had married twice, and his first wife would die of loneliness.
Oh, yay.
And his second wife, tired of his fruitless gold fever, would drink poison and kill herself.
Oh, yay.
Now, I think he barely noticed that the women were gone, and he grew old, and his cabin fell into disrepair, and so he moved into a cave in his land, but he still dug holes. Until one day, Anton's spade hit something, and bending his tired body down to the ground and brushing away the soil, a twinkle caught his eye. It was gold! Excitedly, he took his find down to the nearby village, exclaiming that he had discovered the Reynolds gang's lost gold. And one of the locals there, they advised him to catch the next train to Denver and hire an attorney so that he could protect his discovery. So he did just that the very next morning. So he had struck gold here after all these years of digging, all that suffering. He's finally rich.
Finally.
So bent, double with age, but still with a spring in his step, he enters the attorney's office and he sinks into the chair, and his fragile body is dwarfed by the plush furniture that he's on. And so Anton, he excitedly tells the story that he has found the Reynolds brothers' treasure. And then there's a pause. He takes his last breath, slumps over forward, expired.
Oh dear.
And he never did say where he found his treasure. So it's somewhere up in his land, but he didn't give the exact position. And it's said to still be hidden somewhere until this day, waiting to be discovered by another prospector wishing to try their luck.
What are the chances of that?
I say that's who you're named after.
Is it?
Yeah. I don't actually know how true that story is. Even the bit about the Reynolds gang, because I read 3 or 4 different accounts as to exactly what happened there.
Well, that was nice.
Yeah. So do you have a better treasure story than that, Anton?
I do. I've got the best treasure story.
Okay.
So my amazing story is Cocos Island. Cocos Island is situated 550 kilometres southwest of Costa Rica, our favourite place. It's a small island, just 24 square kilometres in size. It is a true paradise with 300 waterfalls and plants and animals found nowhere else in the world. Whilst writing Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson mentions Cocos Island in a letter, so it's become known as the real Treasure Island. It was discovered in 1526 by a Spanish navigator, Juan de Cabezas.
Your Duolingo's working there.
Due to its remote location off the rich Spanish-controlled territories of South and Central America, it became a favourite spot for pirates to gather food, water, rest and repair their ships. In the early 1800s, British naval officer turned pirate Captain Bennet Graham is rumoured to have buried 350 tons of gold plundered from Spanish ships.
That's a lot.
The Portuguese pirate Dom Pedro Bonita is said to have buried 300,000 pounds worth of silver, and he also hid 750 gold bars, swords and precious stones in a cave. The exact location of Bonito's treasures were lost when he was captured by the British man-of-war, and he and 81 of his crew were hanged. There are some rumours that Benito was Captain Graham, and the British changed his identity to cover their embarrassment. The buried treasure is worth millions of pounds, but centuries of treasure seekers have failed to find it. And these are not even the largest fortunes said to be on the island. The biggest is the treasure of Lima. In 1820, the army of the Jose de San Martin was approaching Lima, so the Viceroy asked British trader Captain William Thompson to take the city's treasury to Mexico until the Spanish had regained control. The inventory of the treasure of Lima included 113 gold religious statues, including a life-size Virgin Mary, hundreds of gold bars and silver, 1,000 diamonds, 200 chests of jewels, 273 jeweled swords, and more. It was loaded onto Thompson's ship, but with such wealth on board, he killed the guards and cut the throat of the priests, throwing their bodies overboard.
I'd do the same.
Not just because they're Spanish.
Oh, wow. Nothing against the Spanish.
That might not get into the podcast. No. Thompson and his men buried the treasure on the Cocos Island, planning to return it to collect it when he was safer. Unfortunately for him, they were soon captured by a Spanish warship, and all but Thompson and his first mate were hanged. The Spanish took them back to Cocos, demanding to be shown where the treasure was buried, but they escaped into the jungle. Thompson stayed in hiding for 20 years. However, in 1841, he's said to have given a map to an Irishman named John Keating, showing the treasure's location. When Keating displayed gold and jewels, supposedly from Cocos, the story soon spread. One man who dreamt of finding the treasure was August Geisler, a German sailor who ran away to sea. While living in Hawaii, he encountered a fellow German immigrant named Bartels.
Oh, very good accent.
Thank you. Who showed him a treasure map of Cocos Island. The map indicated that the legendary treasure of Lima was buried at a depth of 6 feet in a small bay on the northwest side of the island. Motivated by the prospect of immense wealth, Geisler sold his plantation and embarked on a journey to find the treasure. Arriving in Costa Rica, he discovered the existence of the treasure was widely known, and many people had already searched for it, including the proposed digging spot.
So I think his treasure's going to be gone then.
Still, undeterred, Geisler remained steadfast in his belief and convinced 14 merchants and dockside workers to join him in forming a company. They chartered a ship called the Wilhelmina and sailed to the Cocos Island in March 1889. Geisler compared the actual surroundings to the details on Bartle's treasure map and began digging. But after a month of unsuccessful searching, most of the shareholders decided to return home. Determined to continue the quest, Geisler remained on the island with 3 others. They expanded their search, exploring different areas, but still found no trace of the treasure. The shareholders returned with supplies, but their renewed efforts proved fruitless as well. Frustrated by their lack of progress, Geisler realised he needed to search the entire island systematically. In 1894, the Costa Rican government granted Geisler the western half of Cocos Island, where the treasure was assumed to be located. He established an agricultural colony, hoping to support himself and his fellow colonists while continuing to search for the treasure.
See, I find that quite interesting that the government there, because he's just moved there because he wanted to, really. Because he's started trying to establish a little settlement there, he's actually just given it. I mean, you couldn't do that these days, I don't think.
But Costa Rica's the best place, and they're so nice.
That's why the island's now protected. Anyway, sorry.
The colony faced numerous challenges, including poor soil, rats, insects, and the island's remote location, which hindered commerce. Despite the difficulties, Geisler persisted for years. He grew various crops, raised animals, and relied on the island's resources for survival. However, the colony's prospects dwindled, and eventually, the settlers returned to the mainland. Geisler and his wife, Clara, remained on the island alone, dedicating their lives to the pursuit of the treasure. Over the years, Geisler made several trips to the mainland to seek financial support, but was largely unsuccessful. On one of these trips, he left his wife, saying he'd be back after only 6 weeks, which ended up being 6 months. But to make matters worse, on Geisler's return, he found out that Clara had broken her arm the very day he left.
Wow.
She made herself a splint and learnt how to set traps and make rope with only one arm. Amazingly, she recovered. Despite this, Geisler explored the island extensively, becoming intimately familiar with its geography and leaving his mark on the land. However, he never discovered the treasure he sought. In 1905, after years of fruitless searching and the hardships, Geisler and Clara left Cocos Island for good. Geisler spent a total of 17 years searching for the treasure, but only found a few gold pieces and an old gauntlet. He settled in New York with his sisters and continued to hold on to his dream, hoping for financial assistance to resume the search. Unfortunately, the treasure remained elusive until the end of his life. Geisler passed away in 1935, leaving a will that divided his island among various individuals. However, the Costa Rican government contested his ownership claim and reclaimed the island for themselves. The Cocos Island treasures still remain a mystery until this day. Approximately 400 expeditions visit the island, but no treasure has been found. The island has been designated as a national park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a national cultural and historical treasure. Permits are now required for treasure hunting, and the island's only human inhabitants are park rangers. The fate of the treasure of Lima and whether it was buried on Cocos Island still remains a mystery.
Well, okay, you're winning the stories of treasure so far.
I know.
That was an amazing story. Because we don't even know if the treasure was really buried there. And that's what makes it so interesting and such a mystery, is it might not even be on that island, or it might have been found by somebody else and taken off already. So there's so many things, but it's going to be an amazing place.
Yeah, maybe someone took it and kept it a secret. But Geisler, he made boats and stuff out of hollowed out logs, I'm pretty sure, and he used bed sheets as sails and stuff, all the classic stuff like that. But it was really cool. And he had some other families to live on the island, and they had some farms and stuff and some domesticated hogs, things like that.
Yeah, so whilst he had this obsession with the gold, and that's been our theme so far, is this obsession with finding treasure, it seems like, unlike Anton, Geisler, he really lived with the environment really well. And you could actually imagine that being an amazing lifestyle, being on this beautiful island out there. Okay, you're quite isolated, but they really learned, like you're saying, to live with the land and grow everything they needed to survive there. And yeah, it's almost like a paradise.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if you can one-up me with your story here.
Okay, so our final story of this episode is The Voyage of the Centurion.
Dun, dun, dun.
Featuring a Guernsey Great. Yes, I got another Guernsey Great for you.
I'm excited now.
Yeah. So let us head to Portsmouth on the south coast of England. It's Christmas Day, 1739. So what would you like to be doing on Christmas Day, Anton?
Eating turkey, opening presents, and treasure hunting.
And treasure hunting, okay. Well, this wasn't exactly the case for Guernsey man Philip Saumarez, and he wrote, "Received my commission as 3rd Lieutenant on His Majesty's ship Centurion, Captain George Anson, commander. Repaired immediately aboard and found her fitted out with 22,400 pound of bread, much broken by the driving of the tide." And then he goes on to list a few more items. So this is in the morning, another 21 packs of beef come on, or pecks, as he says. So 3,063 items. They bring on jars of oil, like 738 gallons of oil. They bring on more bread, heads of groats, barrels of flour, 6 firkins of butter, and 9.5 heads of vinegar.
I like this bit here. It says heads of pork.
Yes, that's right. Yes, they bring on heads of port.
You just said heads of port.
Did I say port?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, they might have some port on board as well. So who is Philip, I hear you ask?
Who is Philip?
Well, he was born on 17th of November 1710 on the wonderful island of Guernsey. But he would later study in Jersey and then in Southampton.
Yay.
And we'll actually be using extracts from his logs of the voyage to help tell this story. And he was first introduced to the Royal Navy by his uncle, who was a captain. And the sea ran strong in their family, with 2 of his cousins also becoming admirals. And his nephew, which we'll do an episode on one day, was Admiral James Saumarez, 1st Baron de Saumarez, who served with Nelson, and also led the Royal Navy's Baltic fleet aboard HMS Victory. So that's something to look forward to.
He is a big Guernsey Great.
He is, I know, I'm a bit scared of doing him. But why was he joining Commodore George Anson? And just so you know, Commodore is the rank above captain, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, several years earlier, the Spanish had cut off the ear of a British captain while searching his ship. And needing not much of an excuse in those days, the British decided that vengeance was needed. So begun the War of Jenkins' Ear. And the main thrust of the British forces, they were going to be sent up to the Caribbean to do some raiding and stuff there and protect like the British colonies there. So Anson wasn't going with those though, so he was only going to be given what was left available in terms of ships and troops and things, okay?
The battered bunch.
The battered bunch, yeah. Well, you're going to be shocked by this, I think. And he had been tasked to annoy and distress the Spanish in the South Pacific by taking, sinking, burning or destroying all their ships, and to surprise or take any towns or places belonging to the Spaniards on the coast. And to do this, they'd have to round Cape Horn, so that's South America.
That's difficult to get past as well.
It's really difficult to get past, yeah. There's amazing accounts of it coming up. And so, yeah, these waters were relatively uncharted, and they're going to raid up the west coast of South America. Now, in these days, the Royal Navy is pretty good, and the Spanish are not quite the power they once were. But they still have their South American empire, and during the mid-1700s, when this happens, they were looking at ways to rediscover some of their lost prestige. And they were also still sending shed loads of gold and silver from the Americas to Spain, and a lot of that's going up through the Philippines, and that way around.
That was because like the Incans and stuff didn't value gold as currency. They valued cocoa beans, I'm pretty sure, instead.
And also because they'd just basically become slave labour and exploited.
And we don't like slave labour.
No, we don't. So they've loaded this food onto the boats, yeah? But it's still going to be another 9 months until they set sail. And the flotilla totaled 8 ships in all. So I don't quite know what happened to all that bread on board.
No.
Yeah, you don't eat well aboard ships in the 1700s. So the ships that they've got are the Centurion, which was what's called a fourth-rate ship, of 1,000 tons, 60 guns and 400 men, and the flagship. They also had the Gloucester, which was 853 tons, 50 guns, 300 men. Then they had the Severn, the Pearl, which were slightly smaller ships. And then they had two really small ones, which were the Wager and the Trial. And then they also had two merchant vessels going along with them at the start of the journey, called the Anna and the Industry, which would just be carrying additional supplies for them. So it's not a bad sized force, is it?
No.
They were also going to take 559 Marines with them to help with the landings and the attacks on the towns and things. But as I said earlier, the main thrust was going up to the Caribbean, wasn't it? So Anton, he gets basically what's left. He had men from Chelsea Hospital, so Chelsea pensioners.
Yep.
So soldiers too sick, old or injured to fight, but still capable of doing light duties.
Yeah. Oh, is that them there?
That's them there today, yeah.
Oh,
well,
today.
Not the same men.
No.
So many of them were over 60.
Oh, dear.
Well, many of them were over 70, and sick or maimed. And some of them even had to be carried on stretchers down to Portsmouth. I mean, this is a disgusting stain on history that these old men who should be in their retirement have been forced aboard these ships.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Now, 241 of them would actually run away and escape.
Those are the 240 you could run.
Yeah, those are the 240 best ones.
Exactly.
would run away. So that meant they needed to fill up the ranks with some fresh recruits, many of whom hadn't even been taught how to fire a gun yet when they were drafted or anything. So a lot of them were, the press ganging, where you get forced aboard the ships. And it's been said to be one of the worst crews ever assembled.
Where does the treasure come into this? It's definitely not those guys.
No, they're old treasures. Anyway, so first they'd sail for Madeira. I'm going to go through some of his logs here, okay, as we're telling the story. At 7 a.m, we made signal to weigh and made sail with His Majesty's ships, the Gloucester, Severn, Pearl, Wager and Trials sloop, with two merchant ships laden with provisions for our squadron. So off they set September, when he had started in December the year earlier. Mm-hmm. Now, the voyage to Madeira took 41 days. And when they got there, the governor reported that he had seen 7 Spanish warships the previous week. So luckily they managed to avoid those. And they spent about a month in Madeira, taking on supplies and letting the men rest and recover from illness. And then it was time to go out into the Atlantic. Now, when you're sailing these days, it's really important to go at the right time of year to get all the trade winds and the currents in the right direction. It's during the year. As remember, what's that boat we went on in the Cocos Island?
Yeah.
And they had that game that you could play where you follow the trade winds. So just picture that as well, having to go around the world and things the right way.
Because sometimes, going what you think is the longer way around, but with the wind is 2 times faster than just going up, but slower.
Exactly, yes. Okay, so they're sailing out into the Atlantic, resupplied, and all the extra weight from the supplies and the ships were actually pushing them really low in the water, and that meant that they had closed most of the ports on the side, so inside it got really, really hot and stuffy and smelly.
Ugh.
And each man only had about 40 centimetres for his hammock. So you've got no space, you're just crowded in there. It must be absolutely awful. So the plan was to sail to the coast of Brazil, then head south and round Cape Horn to enter the Pacific. Now, a few more counts from his logs here, okay? 26th of November, 1740. The whole part a constant moderate gale, with fair weather. Richard Pierce, an invalid, deceased. 29th of November. It blew a fresh constant gale. Amos Gordon and Edward Major, seaman, departed this life. 12th of December. 9 a.m, Robert Wilden, our purser, being quite worn out, departed this life. 15th of December. Very uncertain squally weather, with rain. David Redman, a marine, departed this life. So as they're sailing, I think it's quite a common occurrence anyway to get deaths at sea then, but they're getting quite a few numbers.
Not of old age, though.
Not of old age. No. Oh, God. Now, they reached Brazil on the 18th of December, and it was a really welcome relief for them after crossing over the Atlantic. And let's let summary take over again. noon, we passed by an island the Portuguese governor resides on, saluted the fortification with 11 guns. The water on both the island and the continent is excellent and preserved beyond what I have ever observed. After having it on board for a short time, it discharged itself with a green putrid scum which subsided to the bottom and left the remainder as clear as crystal. It's a lovely water there, if you leave it.
Yeah.
Now he's talking about the island a little bit. The woods abound with several medicinal and aromatic plants. One might imagine oneself in a druggist's shop. As he traversed the woods, the fruits of chiefly the orange, lemon, lime, citron, melons, grapes, guavas, and pineapple, and many potatoes and onions. Here is a great plenty of oxen, with many pheasants, inferior to ours, but with abundance, and monkeys and parrots all edible. They have a very singular bird called the toucan.
This reminds me a bit of Terry Pratchett books, like Guards and stuff, where it's not the best bunch of soldiers and stuff, but also like they're saying the water's nice if you leave it a bit. So it's sort of nice, but only if you have the right mindset for it. Yeah. I guess.
In those days, that was nice though. We didn't have nice filtered, sanitized water like we do today. But I like his accounts of when he's exploring the islands and things as well. Despite sounding like a tropical paradise, another 80 men would die on the island during their month-long stay there.
Wow.
But luckily there's now starting to get lots of lovely citrus fruit inside them, so obviously you need that vitamin C.
To stop scurvy.
Exactly, yeah. And actually I want to cover a little bit more about the place he visits, maybe on a bonus episode, and look possibly at some of the illnesses you get to see as well. All that disgusting stuff.
On a bonus episode, is that going to be on Patreon potentially in the future then?
Oh yes, that's a great idea, yes.
If you're not already on Patreon, subscribe to our Patreon. I think there's 3 tiers. There's like a £1, £5, £10. The £5 probably my preferred one.
That's the recommended one, but can we stop this advertising, please, and get on with the story about the treasure?
I'm sorry, it's just built into me.
Okay, yeah, so the Spanish, they were actually aware of this British fleet sailing down, and they had sent Admiral Pizarro to hunt them down. And Anton ships, they're still so full of supplies that many of the gun ports were blocked. So if they did end up in battle with the Spanish, they wouldn't be able to get all their cannons out, and they'd have to start throwing things overboard to even be able to fight. And yeah, with the Spanish fleet nearby, they couldn't wait any longer, so they decided now was time to sail around Cape Horn, which, as you said, is one of the most dangerous sea passages in the world. Whilst doing this, there was a risk that their ships would become separated, so they had prepared some rendezvous points in case this ever happened, like further around the coast. And it wasn't just the Marines or crew who were dying, the officers were too, and this included Captain Danny Kidd.
Oh, no, at least... Wait, Dandy Kid, at least he is a child.
Oh yeah, Dandy Kid, yes, Captain Dandy Kid. There were children on board, actually. So he was captain of the Trial.
What, 50-year-olds?
No, young children, your age. So Captain Dandy Kid of the Trial, he sadly passed away from an unknown fever that made him delirious and go mad during his final hours. Now, this actually led to Philip Saumarez getting his first command. Captain Kidd's death made a revolution by promotion among us, and I was appointed first lieutenant of the Commodore. But my predecessor, Lieutenant Sanders, to whose command the sloop descended, that's the Trial, was taken dangerously ill and became incapable of taking possession of his charge, and I was ordered to take command until his recovery. So Dandy Kidd has died. Then the guy who was meant to replace him has got too ill to take over, so now Saumarez in charge of the Trial.
Cool.
I keep saying Trial, but it's the Trial. It's the old spelling, it throws me. Anyway, so this was one of the worst times of the year to attempt round in the Cape, and they were doing it backwards. So against the currents and prevailing winds. Now, Saumarez in his little ship, the Trial, one of the little diddy ones, they would be actually leading the way, because you send the little ship round first to sound to see how deep the water is and stuff like that. Yeah, how many fathoms deep it is, yeah, exactly. And he'll be leading the way for about 7 weeks in this boat. So there's a lovely picture here of a vessel, rough seas.
Yeah, it looks very rough.
And so we're going to begin with storms for a month. And the captain of the Pearl, he actually said that they were the largest waves he had ever seen, and that the 1,000-ton Centurion was thrown around like a toy ship. Another of the seafarers, he wrote, "It was the last cheerful day that the greatest part of us would ever live to enjoy." Yeah. And in his log, Saumarez started noting the conditions, and he said, "I was stationed to look out for islands of ice, and had to endure such fatigue from the severity of the weather and duty which the nature of the service necessarily brought on me, that really my life was hardly worth preserving at the expense of such hardships. Our own ships had several miraculous escapes, which, in the obscurity of the night and the violence of the weather, often endangered floundering the sloop. So the sloop's the little ship here. It's freezing cold and stuff is being washed overside or damaged. And, I mean, how are they going to keep all that bread dry in that condition?
They don't have heaters or anything there.
Well, they would have a fire on board for cooking, so they'd have a fire on board these wooden ships. So I guess there was, like, some sort of stones or something around it, or ceramic or something like that, or metal.
Just not wood.
Just not wood, no. Yeah. So, 23rd of March. Blew very hard, with a large hollow sea breaking continually over us, our masts and rigging all coated and frozen with snow and ice. So that's salt water as well, which has got a lower freezing point. 24th of March. The sloop hauled, being half full of water with the seas, which had shipped and were obliged to keep bailing and pumping all night, our pumps often likewise being very indifferent, being continually choked up with sand. So the boats were also now filling with water, and they've got to keep pumping it all out. And at this stage, the Pearl and the Severn, they were both turn for home and leave the rest of the ships. The merchant ones had left them Madeira. Okay. So not only are the conditions really terrible, but their navigational charts were actually wrong, sometimes by hundreds of kilometres.
Oh dear.
Because it's so uncharted, and at that time you couldn't measure longitude, so that's going around like the equator. That direction is your longitude.
One of them definitely left their glasses at home.
Yes. So you actually find that Philip Saumarez, he'll mention Dampier's charts a lot. So remember Dampier when we covered him? And he'd been one of the few people to go around there, like 3 times. And they'd be making revisions to the charts and always continually improving them. And whilst they're doing this, they also have to keep pumping water out of the hulls of the boats. Throughout all of this, they were also dealing with sickness, fevers, dysentery, and one of the worst outbreaks of scurvy ever recorded.
Oh dear.
And I've got a beautiful picture here of scurvy.
Let's get past that bit.
It's only a diagram.
Yeah.
We took the tarpaulins off the gratings and hatchways to air between the decks and clean the ship as much as lay in our power. It really was scarce conceivable what a stench and nastiness our poor sick people had caused among each other, and which contributed to infect those who were struggling against distemper. So I've already described how hot and horrible it was. Now it's cold and horrible, but people are so sick and there's so little airflow down there that you've got all these dead and dying and ill people just festering down there. And the death toll, it keep rising, and Saumarez wrote for 6 weeks they seldom buried less than 5 people a day.
Down that old age.
It's not just the old age though, these are the young people as well, mate.
Oh no.
And it was so bad that men were actually dying on deck and their bodies were just being left there, so nobody had the energy to move them. But despite all of this, none of the ships were lost.
How?
I know, it's incredible. So these crews, and even the people who haven't died, they're going to be so weak now. And just how do you keep your morale up?
Is our guy okay?
Yeah, he's fine at the moment, yeah. Yeah, he's still writing his logs. And in one of them, he writes of an explosion. In the height of the squall had several violent claps of thunder before the explosion, which took a quick, subtle fire, ran along our decks, which burst and made a report like a pistol, and struck several of our men and officers, who, with the violence of the blow, were black and blue in several places. The fire was attended with a strong sulphurous smell. So maybe for religious, you might think the devil was punishing you as well, perhaps. Fire and brimstone. Now, mid-April, Saumarez, he returned to the Centurion, where he found nearly everybody was infected with scurvy. And in his logs, he noted that every time they sailed north, so you tack up and down against the wind, the spirits of the men would improve, but they're not round yet, so they're starting south again as they're going against the wind. But what after must have been a really long, agonising and restless weeks, cold, hungry and ill, they actually managed to make their way around the Cape, but a few of the ships had become separated. But as you remember, they had their plans to rendezvous. And there's one place lower down the coast, but I'm going to skip over that and go up to Juan Fernandez Island, which is an island off the coast of Chile. And that's where they were scheduled to meet, okay? Now, do you remember the Spanish?
I remember the Spanish.
Pizarro, yeah. In their pursuit around the Cape, they had lost a ship and also half their men to the storms, and they actually turned back. Away from all the storms and everything, how do you think the voyage to Juan Fernandez went now they're in calmer waters?
I'm not sure.
Good or bad?
Probably better.
Should we find out?
Yep.
Well, their charts were wrong. And they couldn't find the island. And it's about 300 kilometres further out to sea than they thought. And they sailed the wrong way originally, and then they had to turn back when they saw the case of the mainland, because that's all Spanish, you can't go there.
Oh dear.
And so in those couple of weeks, another 100 men perished due to scurvy aboard the Centurion. But the delay did actually mean they had a little bit of luck. At length we arrived at the island of Juan Fernandez in the South Sea, after having several imminent dangers of shipwreck on the coast of Chile. We anchored here on the 16th of June 1741, just 10 days after the departure of a Spanish ship of war, which was sent by the Admiral of these seas. So the Spanish know they're there. Message has travelled across the continent and they're hunting them. And this is just as well, because despite being a 1,000-ton, 60-gun ship, the Centurion only had 72 able crew members left aboard, and that included boys. The rest were sick or dead. Tasks that normally take, say, 20 minutes to do would take a couple of hours, because they just didn't have the strength to do it. So the voyage up until this point has taken them 9 months. So remember, the Costa Rica packet sailed all the way from London to San Francisco, so even further around in 131 days, 130 years later, but this is 9 months. And now other ships from their flotilla, they started to arrive, although the Wager had been shipwrecked and their crew had mutinied. Of the trial, Saumarez wrote that a great number of the men had been lost or were sick, and it was impossible to conceive the stench and filthiness in which the men lay. So, horrible conditions again. Then of the Gloucester, he said, I went aboard her and found her in the most deplorable condition, nearly 2/3 of her men being dead, and very few of the rest able to perform their duty.
Honestly, they need to step up their game here.
I think that's a little bit harsh. They've been going on this treacherous journey. And so on Juan Fernandez, they would stay for 3 months, recuperating and repairing their ships. And it really must have felt like paradise to be there, I think. There were some lovely woodcuts, which one of these sailors did, which we have in the show notes. And this island, I can't remember if we spoke about it in the William Dampier episode, but he went there as well, because it's where Alexander Selkirk had been left marooned for 5 years, and he was later rescued by Dampier. And Selkirk, he is the inspiration for Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe.
We did mention it. I don't remember if we mentioned the name or not. We probably did. Actually, yeah, we did. I remember it now. Juan Island.
And so when Selkirk was left there, some gates were left with him. And so let's got a bit of description from Saumarez on the island now. Their flesh was excellent and ate like venison, and perhaps might still be the remains of Selkirk's nursery. I shall not attempt a description of this island at present, but only tell you that it is the most romantic and pleasant place imaginable, abound with myrtle trees and covered with turnips and sorrel. Its bays are teemed with all kinds of fish, seemed calculated for the reception of distressed seamen. We stayed here 3 months, employed in retrofitting our ships and restoring the health of our sick. I cannot omit to mention the sea lions, which seem as extraordinary a production as any in the creation, and might justly deserve the observation of an expert naturalist. This surprising creature partakes in a double nature, being truly amphibious. It divides its time equally between land and sea. Now, I'm going to skip over a couple of months, okay? But remember that they were meant to be causing a bit of a revolt and havoc all along the coast of South America, yeah? For the British against the Spanish. But with pretty much everybody dead or sick, that's not going to happen. So instead, they did manage a couple of minor raids on the coast, including sacking the town of Paita, where they plundered some money and jewels, although most of that had been hidden before they arrived, because you're going to see the ships coming in the abandoned town. So they set fire to it, except the churches. And they also destroyed and captured several Spanish ships. And they slowly worked their way up the coast of Mexico, from where the Manila galleon would depart. Now, you might remember it from Dampier's episode, if we got there.
I think so.
It's the treasure galleon, which takes all the treasure across the Pacific every year from the Americas to the Philippines, which at the time was a Spanish colony. And so they waited out at sea for several weeks, hoping to catch it. And I think it was in port at the time, but eventually they tired of waiting. And on the 6th of May, 1742, they left Mexico to cross the Pacific, not wanting to go around Cape Horn again. By this stage, they only had the Centurion and the Gloucester left, because they burnt the other ships they captured, or they were just in states of disrepair by that stage. I think they said that quite a lot of the Spanish ships they captured weren't particularly seaworthy. They're okay going up and down the coast, but not further out to sea. So back to Saumarez here. We left Acapulco on the 6th of May, 1742, and here begins another series of misfortunes and mortalities surpassing the first. So worse than the first. We had a passage of 3 months and a half to the Landron Islands, which is generally made in 2. Yet it was a vulgar opinion amongst our people that we had sailed so far past all the land in the world. The length of time and the badness of the weather rendered both our ships leaky. This joined to our mortality, the scurvy raging amongst us, as much as ever. So soon they'd be down to one ship. On the 15th of August, these 24 hours chiefly calm, with exceedingly hot, sultry weather. Lay near to the Gloucester, under foresail and mizzen. In the evening, the Gloucester's longboat came aboard with 46 sick men, most of them very ill. 3 died in getting over the side. So just climbing aboard the other ship. I mean, we're laughing, but it must have been so bad. And yeah, so there's basically no crew left to man the Gloucester. Our people employed in clearing the Gloucester, having got as much off as our strength and time would permit us, the commander gave us orders to set her on fire. The prospect of our last ship, of our squadron, blazing within 2 miles of us, combined to make us as melancholy a scene as I have ever observed since I have been in the Navy. So, yeah, they're down to just the Centurion now, not in a particularly good condition either. There's up to 7 feet of water, so 2 meters of water inside the hull.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, so they're having to man the pumps all the time. So much so that apparently even Anton got involved as bailing out the water. Mm-hmm. So they needed some land desperately. And the first place that they found was Guam. And guess who controlled Guam?
Spain.
Yeah, the Spanish. So this was in late August 1742. But it's not actually quite that bad because it actually hit an island 100 kilometres north of Guam first. Okay. When they got there, they basically found it undefended. And I think there were only 21 men on the island in all. And outside was sailing a little Spanish boat. Here's Saumarez's account. There were about 7 men in her unarmed, 2 of which were Spaniards and the others Indians. These people informed us that the island was uninhabited and was used by the Spanish garrison at Guam. They were sent by the governor to kill beef, and they were preparing it in the sun, and were to then return to Guam. So, yeah, they've landed on this little island, and it seems like it's a brilliant place for them to have hit after travelling across the Pacific, because it's not controlled by the Spanish, and it's basically being used as a larder for a Spanish colony 100 kilometres away.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So, really, really good. And the island is called Tinian. And we anchored at an island called Tinian, uninhabited, but abound with wild cattle, hogs, fowls, and fruits. We could not have fallen on a better place. I am convinced that had we stayed 10 days longer at sea, we should have been obliged to take to our boats, our leak increasing so fast, and our people being all infirm and disabled. We immediately sent all our sick ashore, and began to hope for better times, feeding plentifully on roast beef. So I think 10 days might have been stretching a bit with the state of their boats.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they only had about 70 fit crew, and over 120 needed to be carried ashore. And 21 of those died in the process of being carried ashore.
More beef for the rest of us.
So they haven't got that desperate yet. They're not uncasting lots. Now, they would remain in the...
That's not what I meant, by the way. I meant that you're not going to eat the corpses now.
I thought you meant eating the people.
No.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so they would remain on this little island for 2 months, repairing the Centurion as best they could and getting their strength back. And it seems to be a common pattern here, and all these grueling voyages are really taking their toll on them. But it's pretty good, on this lovely island. I mean, their luck must finally be turning, do you think?
Yeah, and as long as the island's pretty.
Yeah, it's a lovely island. September the 18th. In rough seas, the ropes and anchors snapped, and the Centurion was blown out to sea with 109 crew aboard. And that included Saumarez. And he ordered that 4 guns be fired as an alert. And that left only 107 men on Tinian, including Anton. So now they've now been separated, and the ship in really bad condition, just being blown out to sea. The anchors are snapped as well, so they can't even stop themselves properly.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And the ship still really badly damaged and taking on water, and its main masts were quite vulnerable by this stage, and they had to take down some of the sails because there's risk of them snapping in the wind. So the currents continued to push them further and further out to sea. And I think they went a few 100 kilometres out to sea with a skeleton crew of unfit people and boys on board and all sorts. So Anton, fearing that he'd never see his beloved Centurion again, ordered that the Spanish bark, such as the ship that the Spaniards had taken over there, be cut in half. And then lengthened. So I love the fact you just cut this boat in half, and then you're going to stick all these extra bits of wooden or panels. So he wanted to sail the 2,500 kilometres to China on that boat. They've also still got the Spanish. They haven't killed them. Mm-hmm. They're basically prisoners, so they're still watching those guys as well. But luckily, somehow 19 days later, Saumarez and his skeleton crew returned in the Centurion.
What?
Yes, they managed to sail it back somehow.
That's why Guernsey better.
Yeah, I mean, what a legend. But then it got blown away again.
Oh my god.
Only for 5 days this time. Then on October the 20th, 1742, still damaged and barely seaworthy, they decided to sail for Macau. And that was, I think it's pretty much the day the ship came back. They thought, we can't keep it here. We're just going to have to grab everything off this island, get on it and sail away again. And on the 11th of November, they would arrive in Macau. So that's in China, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a neutral port. A lot of it was controlled by the Portuguese, and it was the only foreign colony on China. You still had a lot of Chinese officials and things there as well, and they weren't particularly happy having this man of war, this British warship in port. So they see many merchant trading vessels, but never such a big battleship there. And it took months and months of negotiations and bureaucratic dealings to just arrange to get the ship repaired and to get food and stuff on. And there were also French and Portuguese agents in the city working against the British, and all sorts of cultural clashes with the Chinese where they didn't understand what was going on. So there's apparently one French captain, he says that he would attack the Centurion for 40,000 Spanish dollars, but the Spanish turned him down. And then even the British East India Company captains didn't really want them there because they were worried what effect it'd have on the trade. So everything's against them in the port as well. The ship's not being repaired until finally on the 20th of January 1743 there's an agreement reached. Saumarez writes here, "Sent ashore our beams and spars and cleared our decks of all our lumber. Sent our pinnace to haul us
Your what,
up..."
sorry? Your pinnace?
Yeah, our pinnace. Our pinnace. And Cotter agreed to give $2,000 for careening and completing the ship, so that's the Centurion, entirely. This was esteemed a very extravagant price in these parts, where a day's labour is extremely cheap. So sounds like today, actually, we get cheap labour in China. So I'm not going to cover all of the dealings and wranglings with the Chinese. Unfortunately, all the tensions remained, but Anton, being the good British Royal Navy captain that he was, he promised to do nothing naughty whatsoever, and they were going to leave port on the 11th of April and just sail home after all these years out at sea. Okay?
I believe him.
Or not. No, he wasn't going to do that. So once they had left Macau and sailed back out to sea, because it was a long, big river estuary that they went up there. On the 19th of April, he told the crew that they were going to go and attack the Manila galleon. And this news was greeted with cheers and rejoicing, because a lot of the men would have recovered by now.
And in the chair, one of them died.
Probably. Yeah, had a heart attack from the excitement. Yeah, after so much trouble and hardship, the crew wanted something to show for their journey. So at the moment, all they'd done is sailed somewhere, burnt a town, sunk a few Spanish ships, and they got a little bit of treasure from the towns and stuff, but not a lot to show for it. And most of them were dead. So by May, they were in position. So they sailed back down to the Philippines, okay? And they were waiting for the galleon at Cape Espiritu Santo. This was the first place where the Manila galleon would make landfall after its epic Pacific voyage. And so they lowered their topsail so they could remain hidden below the horizon. Just a single ship with 227 crew, 27 of whom were just boys, out of the 8 ships and nearly 2,000 crew who had left England years earlier. And they waited. And they waited. The end.
Huh?
Not really.
Oh, you keep getting me.
On the 20th of June, they spotted sails on the horizon and the men were mad with joy. The ship was the Nostra Senora de Cavadonga, and it was said that its oak panels on the sides were too thick for any cannonball to pierce. Let's Saumarez tell the story, shall we? Warning, there's graphic scenes ahead.
Uh-oh.
At sunrise, we were agreeably surprised with the sight of a sail from the masthead in the southeastern quarter, her top-gallant sails appearing half out of the horizon. We naturally concluded it must be one of the galleons. At 11, her hull entirely out of the horizon. At past noon, we took in the top-gallant sails and hauled up the mainsail, and soon after hoisted the broad pendant and colours, and fired such of the chase, the bow guns, as could be brought to bear on her. The galleon immediately returned our fire. His shots were not ill directed, and generally shattered our rigging. So there are a couple of things to note here. They're starting to go into battle,
But they're saying that they saw the sails at, what time was it in the morning?
11. Oh no, earlier.
Yeah, at 10 or something, wasn't it? No, at sunrise. At sunrise. So imagine you've been travelling for years, and here's your big prize coming towards you. And it's taking hours and hours. It's like in a film where you get something coming in slow motion towards you, and it just takes so long. Imagine the anticipation, everything building there, thinking this is your one chance to do it.
One of them definitely died when they were waiting.
My God. There's a beautiful painting here of the battle.
Oh, that's really nice.
It's lovely, isn't it? The light and the colour there, and the water's gorgeous. Okay, let's let Saumarez carry on, shall we?
Being come abreast of him, within pistol shot, the engagement began on both sides with great briskness. Our guns during the whole time being laded with ball and grape shot made havoc, as likewise our tops, which were full of our best marksmen, by our enemy's own confession, galled them extremely.
The best marksmen are the ones that can see, by the way.
Yeah, well, they've been training a lot before this, and then by the tops they mean they put their best marksmen up on the mast high up so they could shoot down onto the enemy ship. Grape shot, do you know what that is?
Yeah, it's like the net with the cannonballs on. Is it not?
No, grape shot. Imagine lots of grapes made of lead put into the cannon, so when you fire it, it's like a shotgun and scatters.
Oh.
So it's an anti-infantry weapon rather than one that's going to into the ship. Yeah, so where were we?
Our first broadside had a good effect with both his men and rigging. His ensign staff, amongst other things, was shot away. Then the ensign set on fire, but was soon extinguished by them. The enemy on his side kept plying us with his guns and pedros,
which is a type of little gun, I think. I did look up, but I've forgotten.
The latter being loaded with bags of stains, iron nails, and musket ball quartered as for the muskets.
So again, like a shrapnel, like the grape shot, the pedros.
After the first discharge of them, they were observed seldom to appear, our grape scouring the decks very successfully. After nearly 2 hours' engagement from our first gun, he struck his standard. We hoisted the cutter, and the Commodore sent me on board to take possession of her.
So, somewhere he has been ordered to go and capture the ship. He's gone up from, like, third in command, or whatever it was at the beginning, or third rate, to second in command now.
At my arrival on board, I found them in a state of mind that the conquered may generally be supposed to be in, being doubtful of the treatment they were to receive, and at the same time had no great opinion of our humanity from the different persuasions in religion, having represented us to themselves as a set of cannibals. Their deck afforded such a scene as may be supposed after a sharp dispute, being promiscuously covered with carcasses, entrails, and dismembered limbs. The main hatchway contained likewise several of their dead which had been thrown down during the action. The ship was surprisingly shattered in her hull, masts, and rigging. The mainmast was half shot through, and few of the shrouds left standing. As to our ship, we received several shot on the hull. The foremast and bowsprit had likewise each been shot from the great guns. In the action, one man was killed at his quarters, another died within an hour of his wounds, and the third after an amputation of his leg. And the second lieutenant, with 15 men besides, were wounded. Thus entered the engagement, in which, if the number of our guns and the weight of our metal be impartially considered, it must be confessed we engaged with an enemy with great advantages on our side.
So, yeah, the casualties were very one-sided. As he said there, they only lost one man during the battle, and another a couple of hours later, then one with his leg when it was amputated, and 15 men injured. The Spanish lost 76 men with another 84 injured.
67 men.
67 men, thank you. Not 76. Now, aboard the ship, there were 1.3 million pieces of 8 and 34.5 tons of silver.
Who counted all of those?
Well, no, that's the funny thing. They didn't count it reliably at first, and Saumarez, who'd been put in charge of this ship, which is the greatest prize ever captured by a British ship at the time, he kept searching it, and he'd find all these like loose panels, which there'd be more treasure behind.
That's cool.
And they would, empty out a keg of flour, and there'd be more treasure at the bottom of that. They'd hidden it literally everywhere.
That's the hidden treasure.
So Saumarez, he's been put in charge of the Manila galleon, and it's in a pretty bad state. And you've got a tiny crew, and you've just captured the jewel of the Spanish treasure fleet. You're in hostile waters. You're outnumbered by your prisoners 2-1. And so what are you going to go and do?
Just really want to go back home.
Yeah, you want to start heading for home, but you're probably not going to get there in your on-seaworthy ships. So let's sail back to China, because they were so happy to see us the first time. Okay. The second time they arrived in Macau, the Chinese were even more distressed to see Anton than they were the first time, with the Centurion towing the Spanish galleon behind it. Yeah, so they tried to say that originally, and it just wasn't working, so they had to start towing it.
It just wasn't working.
No. And the Chinese also couldn't understand why the British had taken so many prisoners and not killed them. So there's a cultural difference down there. They're really confused apparently by having somebody like this ships that they go out to sea and they make their wealth through piracy effectively rather than trade. And they just, it's like this bizarre clash. And the main guy, like Chinese guy, I can't remember what they're called, he would never actually meet any of the Westerners in person. He would all work through agents. He had all these different competing people and whatever going on. So it's really difficult. But Anton would get to see him because he was a officer of the Royal Navy. Mm-hmm. He declined to pay the harbour fees and all sorts. It's like, we're a Royal Navy battleship. We're not going to do this. And we will torture you. And anyway, I'm not covering all the details there. So back to the prisoners, okay? They are being kept below decks in really, really cramped conditions. You know, the sailors only had 40 centimetres. I imagine the prisoners had even less than that.
35.
But they actually said that they were treated better than they expected to be. They thought they were just going to be killed. And in fact, the captain of the Covadonga, he would later write to Saumarez, thanking him for his kindness. I must write to you only to give you due appreciation for the great zeal you have shown in favouring the persons who are prisoners in this ship. They have received from you special regard and affection. You give me great reason to show my gratitude under conditions which prevent me from doing so. I, thank God, have recovered from my pains, although there still remains those in my feet. But by walking, I hope to get better soon. In a few days from now, if I'm so fortunate, I hope to see you in port, where we shall be able to speak more at ease. Meanwhile, I pray God guard your life for many years, and I beg to remain with respect and affection. So that's amazing. So they've lost this massive ship. They've had like a big number of their crew killed. They've been stuck aboard, sailing back for a couple of months or something back to China in horrible conditions. It's like, thank you for looking after us so well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that shows maybe a bit of respect among the different captains there.
Or it just shows how bad these Spanish ships are.
Well, they have been ordered to put any English to the sword in the South Pacific. So Anton and co got captured. They wouldn't have had the same treatment. Anyway, eventually the Centurion was repaired. And I imagine having lots of silver and gold and stuff now would have helped smooth out those negotiations. And by December, they were ready to set sail for home. For real this time.
Mm-hmm.
And just wait until you hear what happens on their voyage home. You ready?
I'm ready.
Absolutely nothing of note.
Oh.
Yes. Nothing.
You've tricked me again.
I have tricked you again. And so after nearly 4 years after setting out, they anchor in St. Helens in the Isle of Wight at home at last, just with the Centurion now. So they'd sold the Manila galleon to the Portuguese, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Only 145 of the original 1,936 crew returned aboard the single remaining ship. All of the Chelsea pensioners died.
Oh,
I think one of their commanders, he held out until nearly not to the end, but he held out
quite
the longest. Long. Yeah. Another 500 people had actually survived on, the ships that turned back at the Cape. So 500 survived there, and the Wager, they wanted mutinied some of those. There's a big adventure there, which we might do. Haven't read about it yet, but we might cover that on our bonus. Anyway, so the numbers and horrible. The Spanish had lost 12 merchant ships and 4 men of war, and of course a Manila galleon. So I think he half fulfilled his mission. Anton, Saumarez, and the crew were heroes when they arrived back in England, and they may have failed to course the revolt in South America and had accidentally circumnavigated the globe, but they had captured a Manila galleon. And the treasure was put aboard 32 wagons and paraded up from Portsmouth, I think it was. And there were cheering crowds just pulled through London and taken to the Tower of London. And today it would be worth 60 million. It's the largest treasure haul ever captured.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So they did actually do all right then.
I think the Spanish were doing this every year. And then Anton, he was invited to meet the king and is later made Fourth Lord of the Admiralty. He was given £91,000 and his annual pay was generally £719 a year.
Not bad.
And the regular crew, they got £300, which is 20 years' pay for them.
That's not bad either.
So you can see why people went away. Remember when we did our pepper episode and how much bringing back some of the spices was worth?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing here. I mean, big risk, but high reward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Philip Saumarez, he rose to second in command during the voyage. And it was not just due to the unfortunate deaths of other officers, but also due to his ability and skill. And during that time, he also formed a really close friendship with Anton. And he would be made...
They're the only two left, that's why.
Yeah. He would be made captain of HMS Nottingham, and he would capture a French warship called the Mars.
Dun, dun, dun.
So he, really good career ahead of him. I mean, amazing naval officer. And he also designed the first ever Royal Navy uniforms. So why do you think he did that?
So there's like a lemon pouch to stop scurvy and to hold them up properly and keep them straight so they don't die of old age.
No, it was after their dealings with the Chinese, they thought that they needed a really smart, amazing uniform, so they looked like proper official representatives of the king. So that was one of the reasons why the uniforms were designed, so that the officers could really stand out and look the part and all professional. Yeah.
Is that the classic blue uniforms? Are they the same or have they changed really?
They would have changed since then, but the buttons and that general old idea that you have today was started there.
He is pretty good actually.
But unfortunately, his life would be cut short when he was killed in battle aged just 34 on the 14th of October, 1747. He was hit... I should laugh.
He was hit by a cannonball.
Thank you. He was hit by a cannonball, which isn't in the slightest bit funny, but it is after all this
that's
trauma.
It's not funny.
And so respected is he that there's actually a memorial to him in Westminster Abbey.
I think if he didn't get hit by that cannonball, really unfortunately, he would have actually done a lot more.
He probably would have gone on to be an admiral as well.
One last thing, I think it was a Jersey when he shot him. They're getting jealous, yeah.
Some of his family was from Jersey. His cousins, that were the admirals, were from Jersey. They're not the enemy, I've told you this before. We had somebody listen in Jersey the other day.
If you're still listening, I take back everything I said. Support our Patreon. Yep.
That's better, yes. Peace in our time. We don't want more of this stuff going on. Go on. There's been enough killing this episode. But I guess you probably want to know what happened to the Centurion, won't you? That gallant ship. Well, she was repaired so many times. Was she even the same ship? Just watch that Greek thing where you have one boat and if you replace enough parts of it, is it still the same boat?
Oh yeah, it's you remove a plank and replace it every time.
Yeah. But I think she still was the same ship. Her spirit was there, and she would serve another 25 years.
That's not bad.
And I think even Anton, I don't know if it's aboard her, but he led her in a battle where we defeated the French.
Huzzah!
But we also have French listeners who we love, really.
Yeah.
And the Spanish ones. Yeah, so that is the voyage of the Centurion.
Oh, and we've got a picture here. Wow, they really got stuck around the Cape Horn, didn't they?
They did, yeah, they went all over the place around there. I think that's an amazing tale of going and not treasure hunting in the same way as the first two, but still one of the goals was to capture the wealth of Spain. And
yeah, it's quite a good story as well, and it involves the Guernsey Great, so 10 times better.
Yeah, I can't believe those Chelsea pensioners there. I mean, that was dreadful what was done to them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you were joking about it all the way through, but I hope you realise how atrocious it was aboard those ships.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of these boys were your age, or a bit older than you as well. So, treasure. I mean, I think that these stories all have something in common, and that is mankind's lust and maybe greed to find wealth. And we'll go to the ends of the earth at the expense of ourselves or other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got the story of Anton the Hermit, who, I don't know how true that one was, but it's definitely typical of these sort of stories where you have people in America, you have all the gold rushes there and the gold fever and just being driven beyond anything else.
Yeah, and with Geisler as well, there's the obsession of staying there 17 years as well and convincing other people to come over. So it's not just a few people. There's lots of people. And with this one, being sort of forced because it was more the Navy that wanted the gold rather than the actual people themselves this time. So they forced other people to get the gold.
Yeah, so it's something odd about human nature where we just seem to be driven by greed. And it takes a strong man to resist that.
Talking about greed, support us on Patreon.
That's treasure.
Treasure,
yeah. So we might touch on a little bit more in our bonus episodes, which Anton will tell you about in a minute. But before we do that, if you can't get enough of this wonderful voice of mine, if you listen to episode 84 of the Ancient and Historic Order of the Jackalope, I read some really bad poetry for them in that episode.
I don't think it was bad. Well, the poetry was bad.
Oh, the reading was wonderful.
Yeah.
And we'll play their trailer now.
There are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. But there are also unknown knowns. The Ancient and Esoteric Order of the Jackalope is a secret society devoted to unearthing and sharing this forgotten knowledge. Each episode, we take one of these strange stories and share it with you. No topic is off limits, except for the obvious. Available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Definitely worth listening to. It's nice, good, quirky bits of history and things that they discover there. So, Anton, you want to tell how we can be supported?
We can be supported. Well, you can review us. In fact, I think we got a review. We'll do that quickly now.
Yeah.
So this is the review. A 5-star review, which is good. A charming journey of discovery and learning. An enchanting blend of education and entertainment. This show captures the essence of a child's inquisitive nature. The hosts bring to life a wide array of topics and provide accessible answers to the most awe-inspiring questions. Perfect for parents and children alike, this show is about the love for learning and the joy of discovery. A real gem.
I agree wholeheartedly with every word of that.
Yeah.
Although, except for maybe the children bit, when we have some of the carnage on the ships, I think it's more moving into teenager territory now.
Yeah, I feel like it's not aimed at children, but children can listen to it. It's parental guidance.
Yes. Yeah.
At the moment.
Yes. So how else can people support us?
Subscribe to our Patreon, which we'll really, really, really like. You get quite a bit of bonus stuff.
Content.
Yeah,
bonus very content. Professional content as well. Actually, on the Patreon episodes, you take charge as well, don't you?
I do. You get to see what we do there. And I've written a story called Takarajima. That's one I'm going to give away.
Yeah, loosely based on real history, keeping our treasure theme. We also might share a little bit about our geocaching, where we actually went treasure hunting ourselves and met a pheasant. And I might do a little bit more about some of the logs that somebody wrote when they was on some of these islands and things, just a few little bits and pieces, because there's some nice description there.
And maybe even the, what's it called? My brain's just gone blank. The wager.
Oh yeah, I might do the wager. Yeah, I might do the wager.
That's like a whole other episode's worth for only £5.
That's incredible. Yeah, and also the stuff we've already got there from last episode, and other features such as us melting metal to make divine penises, phalluses.
Honestly.
Sorry.
Yeah, the kids bit.
Yes. Anyway, anything else to say, Anton?
We've got our cue cards, don't we?
Yeah, so as we had our interview months ago now probably, with Paul Mays from Cue Cards, we've selected a couple of cue cards that fit this episode. And I've got the Nuestra Senora de Atacha, which is very badly pronounced, which is another Spanish treasure galleon. And let's have a quick look at the facts for it. So in 1622, the Spanish galleon, with that name I just said, set sail for Spain laden with gold, silver and pearls and other goods from the colonies of present-day Colombia, Panama and Cuba. But the galleon soon met the sea floor when a hurricane sank the vessel near Florida. So
Interesting.
That's wasn't the British thinking here this time.
No.
Or maybe it was Hurricane Britain.
Yes, that one. I have got Loch Archaic treasure, sometimes known as the Jacobite gold. The Loch Archaic treasure was a huge sum of Spanish gold sent to finance the Jacobite rebellion of Bonnie Prince Charlie. But by the time the gold arrived in Scotland in 1746, the war was already over. So, one casket of the gold is said to have been taken by MacDonald. Not McDonald's, that's not how they're so rich.
Oh, that's the Golden Arches.
Yeah. Taken by MacDonald of Barrodsdale, while the other 6 caskets of gold are believed to have been hidden in a secret location somewhere at the lock.
Oh, so there's a lot of treasure still out there.
Mm.
We need a metal detector.
Yeah. You know what? You know how you can fund our metal detector? Join us on Patreon.
We won't need to, well, if everybody joins us on Patreon, we won't need a metal detector.
No. That'll be part of the Curious Army.
Yes.
Oh, actually, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Anyway, let's say our thank yous now. Other ways you can support us are following us on social media. Where can you do that, Anton?
Twitter at...
I've been speaking too long. CurieChildPod.
Instagram at...
CurieChildPod.
Facebook.
Search for The Curiosity of a Child.
We've got a website.
TheCuriosityOfAChild.com.
Merch store.
Shop.TheCuriosityOfAChild.com.
I've got a YouTube channel.
The Curiosity of a Gamer on YouTube.
Yep. What else?
That's pretty much it. I can't speak anymore. That's probably it. Just search for us online and you'll find all the places that you can follow us or support us or review us, because we love reviews and we might even send you some merch if you do that.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you very much for listening. I think you should all go out treasure hunting now, but share your wealth with people around you, not to keep it for yourself.
I don't know if this is possible, but if the Patreon subscriber, will we know who they are? Because then we can send them some merch.
I'll have their email address so I can talk to them.
Okay. So our Patreon subscriber can get some merch, maybe. Yeah. Well,
we'll choose one.
Yeah, we'll choose one actually.
Yeah.
So make sure you go in for that, and then we'll pick a random one, and we'll give you a cool T-shirt or something like that.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. Cool. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you soon. Love you.
Bye. We always say love you now.
I do. I love my listeners.
Do you? I don't. How have I managed to get
You swap back page. Oh, there's a back button on the mouse.
Ah. Where?
The side one, the blue one.
Oh, that's a button? Okay, anyway, back to the podcast.
Hello, we're the Curiosity of a Child podcast.
I'm Anton.
And I'm Rick.
We cover many different stories and topics on our podcast, which is about pretty much everything.
That's right, and we are delighted to have been invited back to the Intelligent Speech Conference. So when is it, Anton?
I don't know. I thought you knew.
I thought you knew.
So what do we do now?
We're going to need some sort of backup plan.
Okay, what's the conference about?
Well, luckily it's about contingency.
History's backup plans. So what are we going to be doing?
We're going to be telling the story of what happens when you're starving in a city under siege for months, surrounded by food that you can't eat as it's your life's work, food that is more important than you are.
Join us in World War II Soviet Russia as we tell the story of the Vavilov Institute of Plant Industry and the scientists who gave their lives so the world could have a plan B.
So what's our plan B going to be?
We're going to have to edit in how our millions of fans can attend the Intelligent Speech 2023.
Join us, 4th of November 2023, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Tickets and more details available at intelligentspeechonline.com.
And if you use the offer code CURIOSITY, you get 10% off.